Good evening. This is the Chicago Computer Society meeting for November 2025 of the Linux SIG group. Tonight, we're going to try and get through as much material as we can. God knows how much we will get to. It depends upon other factors as to how much we get. Got a crazy line. But anyway, I'm going to open up the floor. But before anybody speaks, I want to remind everybody I had a notice in this meeting's announcement and an invite that we are changing in December, like we have for the last several years, to the third Thursday, which is December the 18th for the Linux SIG meeting. So please keep that in mind, mark your calendars, whatever. With the floor open for discussions and that, please raise your hand and I'll call on you to speak up about whatever problems, questions you have with Linux or computing in general. Nobody's got a problem. Peter?
Yeah, I want to continue that thing we started right at the beginning. Or do you want to not?
Go ahead.
What? Go ahead. Okay, so my problem is with time shift. And I'm moving it to another portion of the drive, a separate partition. And I'm having issues because what happened when I did that and created a time shift, I named the new partition time shift so I could find it real easy. And it's plenty big. And the problem is the first time I tried to do it, activate it, it went in because it was on the home directory. It wanted to copy all of the old time shifts, all the old snapshots into the new time shift folder, which was going to eat it up totally, which is not what I wanted to do. So I see you brought it up. So what I want to know is what's the steps for removing the old time shift folders from the original location, and what steps I have to do to actually do that totally across on the machine. So if I need to change permissions to the new one, or I need to remove permissions from the old folder itself, the old time shift folder, I would like to know the steps.
Well, normally you go into settings and location, and this is where you have to make a decision where things go. I can tell you right now, on this machine, I have not used time shift, and it's pointing right now to the root folder. That's what the blue dot is standing for. The second partition is the home folder, and the third one is called var. But what I normally do would plug in a external drive and point to it as being the location for all my files. That way, when I start the actual backup, then I would be A-okay in backing up the time shift to that new location. You have also the problem, you already had several of time shift backups. Now that creates a new problem for time shift as far as that goes, in the sense that you've now told it, I have a new location. This is only place I want my backups to go to. Fine. So if I open up the directory folder here, I can take and enlarge that somewhat, go into the file system, and these are all the folders that generally are there. And there's one called time shift. So I'm in file system on the file explorer, and I've come down to time shift, and that's where it would find the default folders that are normally associated with time shift's existence. And because time shift can have a scheduled set of backups that are automatic, such as each day, every other day, something like that, once a week, once a month, et cetera, and on-demand type of snapshots. And basically, this you have to check and see if that's in your new location that you set up elsewhere. And I assume at the moment what you set up is a partition that you happen to call time shift. That's irrespective. Time shift won't recognize a partition named time shift. That's for human interpretation. And so it's a case where now you have to make sure these folders exist in that new location. If they don't, you want to copy these all out and put them in the new location, number one. Now, one of these or more may contain a snapshot. And if you do copy all the folders because they don't exist in the new location, then you should end up transferring all the backup files. However, you have to do this in an awkward manner. This belongs to root, the admin, the hidden genie in the bottle. And therefore, if I were to try and copy this stuff right now, assuming there was even backup files out here, it won't do everything I request. It may do some things, but the major things we want it to do is not going to happen. Why? Because I'm treated as a standard user right now. If I'm a standard user, guess what? This is not going to transfer because I don't have file permissions. So the only thing you can do here, you would have to go in, find each of your backups that you've already created in the old location and know what folders they are in. The next best thing is to close that down, open up a terminal, and pardon the fact that I've got these fake errors showing up on my terminal. But basically speaking, and I always forget. Uh, yeah, I didn't think so. Okay.
Sudo.
All right. They just call it files on the there. I think it's Dolphin or Nemo. Um, Now I gotta find. All right. There we go. And we're going to try and elevate this.
That's his.
Yeah. This is a problem I thought I would run into, but I was hoping not to. I can't give you the specifics here at the meeting. I can try later on and send you an email. Generally speaking, you have to bring up the File Explorer for the Linux distro you are using in administrator level, either sudo or bring up su minus, I think it is, and give it the password so that you are elevated to root access. Then you can copy the files, but before you copy the files, I recommend changing ownership of each file to your standard user account name. Then move them to the new location. That's the only way to really achieve this, because right now, even if you physically moved them, you would have no access to them. Bob?
One clarification. TimeShift may need for its backups to have root permissions because TimeShift may be restoring to privileged locations.
That's correct. But to move the files, it won't let you move them as long as they're currently root in the root directory. So you have to rename them, move them. Now you got to go back in and change them back to root privilege as the owner. If you don't do that, you're correct. A restore likely will fail because of not having permissions. Go ahead, Bob.
I have been successful at using Nemo, which is the file manager, as root. In fact, you can go into a folder that has root privileges needed for the folder or for its files, and there's a right click in Mint that says open as root. I wouldn't do that in this case because you're going to want to copy as root, and that's better done the way Tim showed from terminal.
It is. This is the only practical way of doing it. I'm trying to bring up here. This is now the file manager, and I'm going to go here, and I can go down to TimeShift folder, and I can see the folders. It may allow me, because I now got sudo Nemo as to bring up this file manager, even though I did it in terminal and it's telling me about this. The problem is it's the only way to do a graphical way of moving the files. Otherwise, the only other way of doing this is you have to use the exact path of this folder here and do an MV command with the full path name to each of the files, along with the file name, and then the destination. And then it'll move the file and keep the permissions, okay? Otherwise, if you try and do a move without this being in administrator's level, you're going to run into big problems trying to move stuff you don't have permission for. That's what I was trying to get to, and I couldn't remember the name of the file explorer being Nemo. So thank you, Bob, for reminding me of the name. Normally down here on the taskbar and in the search here, it goes by files, not Nemo. And that's, to me, that's confusing to especially beginners. So this is the headache you're playing with. And the bad part, if you don't do it this graphical way with pseudo permissions, you've got to take ownership as a standard user in root, move them, and then put the privileges back on the files in the new location. So you got to pick your poison. It's one or the other. I don't know of any other way of doing it. The permissions is going to be the biggest headache. And that's one of the things about Linux in the first place, especially for the novice. You have to identify your credentials as an administrator on the system much more frequently than you normally would on a Windows or Mac system. And that's just a simple piece of security, very similar to what we're talking about here, in the sense that if we take his problem of moving old time shift files, well, there's a slight little problem there. By doing this change, you're trying to override system and file protections. And that's the one thing you got to be very careful about and not violate, or understand how to make one change and then have to change it back later. Dennis?
Okay, I'm totally lost in this. Let me ask a question. So when I first got my Linux system up and going with you, we created my password. And that's what I use now to start up the system. If I want to download, updates, I use that password. When you're talking about this root system admin, are we saying I need another password to do this stuff?
In most systems, no. There are some systems that will allow you to have a different administrator password than your login password. But as a whole, the password you're putting in, when you put it in correctly, when it asks for the password, you say, I am the administrator.
Well, doesn't it already know
No,
that?
no,
Oh, so how do I tell it that I'm the administrator?
no, you're not understanding. When you log in, you're logging in with a proper password as a standard user. That's the automatic default, and it's the way it should be under Windows, but it's not. It's just the opposite. And when you want to do something that requires administrative permissions, such as you put in a command prefaced with a sudo, or you change yourself from sudo to su, which is the same basic thing, only it's permanent until you terminate su, means super user. You have to give it the proper password. Then for if you're under sudo for up to 15 minutes, you are at an administrator level, being able to do things only the administrator can do. If you're under su, until you cancel su, you are an administrator. So if you give it a bad command, disaster can occur depending on what the command was that you gave it, that you thought you were just the average user at the time.
So
So,
you mean if I put in su or sudo, all of a sudden I've set a timer that I can do administrators?
only under sudo, not under su. Su
Okay.
stays in effect until you cancel it.
Sudo makes me the administrator, but
Temporarily.
my password is unchanged though.
Has another, the password just confirms to the system you have administrative privileges. It's either with sudo, sudo, as a temporary 15-minute fix. After 15 minutes, it'll ask you for your password again if you're still doing administrative things. If you go sudo su, then you become a permanent administrator, much like in Windows. And when you do that, it stays in effect until you cancel su. Then your administrative privileges disappear, and you're plain standard user, just like after 15 minutes with sudo.
Once so if I go sudo su, and that's just su, it makes me the permanent administrator for this session until I log off, or when I log back on again, restart my computer, that's still set up.
If you reboot or shut down, that ends the session. But there is command to be able to exit out of su. So all you have to do is say the proper command, exit out of su, and you're back to a normal standard user.
So what was this Nemo that Bob was talking? What's Nemo?
Neo, unfortunately, in Mint, both the icon down on the taskbar, well, on the panel, we call it taskbar for Windows. It says files. If you bring up on the start button and you go into here, it responds to files and brings up the files Explorer. The real name is Nemo. So if you want to have elevated privileges in Nemo, you have to go into the terminal, type in sudo Nemo, press enter, enter your password. And now it appears. This is Nemo, also known as files. Sorry for the confusion. I didn't create it. Now, anything I do in here is as the administrator. So you got to be careful what you're doing. Think things through before you actually do them. Otherwise, you could end up with literally hosing your whole system. And that's not a joke. That's
All right.
real.
I think I need to take a day and sit back and rethink this or go through this. But let me just ask another question. If Pete went to that folder where it had all those subfolders, and instead of transferring stuff, can't he just delete them and recreate those folders in his new drive?
Well, if the new location has the folders, you don't have to worry about that.
Okay.
Okay. So you don't have to worry about copying the files themselves over. His biggest concern is the content of past time shifts that he made, and the default location is in the root directory.
And go ahead.
If he wanted to, he could just delete them all, right, and just start fresh.
That he can do, but he's still in here. He would have to go into time shift and then find out what folders have what old time shifts that he has and manually delete each one of them. Okay. Now, as far as these folders and the parent time shift folder that's under root, he can leave them as is. In fact, if you delete the parent folder, not the subfolders, you can delete these subfolders without causing a problem. But if the system is doing certain operations, maintenance of the system, it's going to want to see time shift. I have on this system a file, I'm going to go back up one, called var. Well, I'm in the file system, I am in root, and I have a var folder. All this was moved by me to another location, but I still have to have var folder in the root. It's mandatory, period. Violate the rule, you got consequences you're going to eventually have. Now, when I'm done here, assuming I'm absolutely done with everything I need to do, when I close this, the sudo or sudo is what I asked for. That now ends. But with the, if I had changed to su, that would have still been in effect right now. And anything else I do, I'm doing as the root administrator. That if I create a file, a brand new file or folder, it is owned by root, not by my standard user name. Now, I know I've lost Dennis, and I'm sorry about that, but some of the issues that we're talking about here are not easy to explain. It's a case where every time you're asked for the password, you put it in, you are gaining at least temporary administrative privileges, and you have to be careful until that 15-minute time limit's up, and then you're back to normal standard user. However, depending on what you're doing, let's say you were in a terminal and you got the sudo privileges. If you close the terminal, the administrative privileges end. So when I close this window here, if I had sudo privileges, which I did, they were still in effect because 15 minutes had not expired. But as soon as I closed the terminal, those privileges disappeared.
Okay.
Now, if that's a mush, I'm sorry, but this is stuff you have to learn over time. There's no magic pill to take to learn all this stuff and know it like a 20-year admin on Linux or Unix systems. It's just the way it is. It takes time to learn some of these things. And it's a good question that came up. So it's up to Peter whether he wants to just delete those old time shifts or to keep them. Now, here's the thing. Generally speaking, time shift type operation is generally referred to in Windows as a restore point. This means they have a limited life, probably no more than 10 days of value. Anything that's older than 10 days is worthless. The reason it's worthless is because most people would never take something that's older than 10 days, restore it, unless they had a major disaster on their hand to begin with, and hoping that at least gives them a partial recovery. But otherwise, everything that's happened in from the time that time shift was created, and when you restore it, you lose any files and program installs and stuff like that because they're going to get wiped out. That's the key to restore points, even in Windows. People think of them like time shift as a real backup. It's not a real backup solution, period. There are no arguments on it. If you want real backups, then you use Clonezilla, RescueZilla, a Macrim Reflect Rescue Media can create Linux backups. It doesn't matter what version of a Linux distro you're running. And there are other programs very much like the Macrim Reflect. Easy to us to do backup is another one. And there's many, many others. The key is in the real backup programs, you want to make sure that your automatic verification after the backup is complete is turned on. Clonezilla and RescueZilla do not do that. You do the backup and you immediately manually ask for a verification of that backup. And then it'll go through the backup process. But most of the others, like Macrim Reflect, easiest to do backup, and many of the others, you turn on the auto verification. And when you do the backup, as soon as the backup is done, you don't get back the machine. It'll start doing the automatic verification. And when that's done, if it says successful, you have an ironclad backup. With Clonezilla and RescueZilla, you have to manually execute the verification step. And if it says everything's good, you're good as gold.
I thought Macrim Reflect didn't do Linux. It does Linux too?
You're not doing an install. Linux will never install an exe file, which what Macrim Reflect is.
Okay.
It's Windows, period. End of argument. However, when you're in Macrim Reflect, one of the first things you need to do is create a rescue media. If you don't have a rescue media and something goes really bad, how are you going to get your backups back on to the system in the first place, if that's necessary? Without the rescue media, you're dead meat. And its purpose is, when you make it, You have to test it out to make sure it boots up correctly, brings up the restore point, and gives you the ability to find your external hard drive of backups, and it'll show you the last one made. And then you can click on restore, restore that backup, and you're back in business. However, before you go to the restore to find your previous backups, it gives you a tab that says create backup. And it looks just like in Windows doing a backup. And it works exactly the same way as if it was on a Windows machine. But it doesn't care. Macro Reflect and many of these other backup programs give a hoot about whatever operating system you have on it. You can have a backup utility that flat out, you may be the only person on the entire planet that has that operating system. So what? Macro Reflect Rescue Media will still back up everything on that drive and be able to restore that exactly the way the image says to make it. That's the sign of a good backup program, period. Any further question? Hello?
I think I got a place to go. I think I'm gonna try first to go into time shift, point it to the old directory in time shift, and delete everything that's in the folders.
I don't know that it's going to let you, but if it does, great.
I've already deleted five or six of the old time shifts because I had to in the default set to be too many.
I know it lets you delete them, but to move them, I don't know if time shift.
I don't necessarily need to move them because the machine is running really good. I just don't want the old ones because it's pointed to the drive that they're on, copied over into the new time shift and make the time shift file infinitely longer.
Are the old
file size?
Are the old time shifts data files on the root directory? Yes or no?
Yes.
Then it's going to back up anything in the root directory, no matter what location you put it in, and that includes an external hard drive.
But the idea here is to get rid of those old files that are in the root,
and
so that they are not backed up.
You have now three options. You can go into time shift to the old location and delete those, period. Or you can try one of the other two methods of moving the files to the new location and get them back to root property. Those are the only three options you got.
The new location is not in root.
It's not in root, but root owns the content. Period. When you do time shift, you are an administrator, and you have to be an administrator to back up most everything time shift contains. Otherwise,
Agreed.
You get nothing or very, very little, and you're screwed when you are relying upon time shift to bail you out of a problem. I don't know how to make this any clearer myself. If somebody else has got a better way of explaining it, go for it.
Okay, I've already gone through looking at command prompt and doing the sudo nemo. So I've already seen that in live on my machine. So I know the path I need to do if I got to go beyond pulling off the old time shift files through time shift.
Right. And then when the best thing to do, by the way, when you're getting ready to move them, is do a copy from the old location to the new location. When you're positive the new location has a proper file for that one, go back to the original location and delete that file. By doing it that way, you're not cutting yourself in the throat, because if anything goes wrong, you may lose that time shift backup, period. By copying first and then going verifying that's a good file copy that was made, go back to the original location and delete that file now, that's much, much safer way of doing it. It's more work, I understand, but shortcuts have a habit of making disasters. So you got to decide how much of a shortcut you're willing to take and hope everything works correctly. If you do it a little bit longer way, then odds are you're going to be A-okay, and the old time shift files will no longer be en route when you take another time shift snapshot.
Okay.
Bob, you got any better way of explaining some of this stuff?
All I was going to say was it sounded like Pete is saying that he's got some old obsolete backups in the time shift directory that he's got. Is that correct, Pete?
Yes.
Correct. I've got at least three left.
If they're more than, Tim says, 10 days old, then they won't be useful anyway. And if you need the space in the new partition, then maybe whatever's 10 days or less old, do what Tim says.
Yeah, you have to think in terms of old Windows. I don't care if it's Windows 7 or XP. Bottom line is a restore point is something that's temporary, just in case something goes bad. It's like very temporary insurance policies you can buy for various reasons. And once you get past a certain point of time, that expires, you no longer are insured, and therefore the policy that you got is a worthless piece of paper.
Yeah, and since this machine is not on all the time, like my Windows box, it only does a time shift automatically when I wake it up.
Okay.
So the second one in is over a week old, and the third one that's still in there is over 3 weeks old.
Yeah, that's garbage.
Yeah, so I'm going to delete those, and I'm also going to delete the last new one, because once I start a new one in the new directory, I'll have everything.
Right.
As long as
you actually have it now. The bad part is if you took that new one that you made in the new directory, you're going to put those old time shifts back into root, taking up space again. And you have to then go in and delete them again.
Yes, I want to get rid of them first before I do a new time shift.
Right. But but also the one that you made in the new location that contains the time shifts in the old root directory, I would get rid of that one too. And the new one you create will replace it.
Yeah, agreed. We have a plan.
No. We'll see
we
if
have
you
a path, maybe. How about we have a path, maybe?
I'm not even sure about that until I hear it was successful. Then I'll say, okay.
Well, I can't really do that right now.
Why not? You can do it right in the middle of the meeting. That way, if you screw up, we'll know.
And I can share the whole screen and let everybody see it
Yeah.
for the next 2 hours.
Yeah, right. It wouldn't take that long, but it would take a while. Okay, does anybody else have any questions, issues, etc.? No, Earl.
One of the things I think I'm interested in the better or butter file system is that it supports those snapshots in a way that ext4 does not. Is that correct?
Well, there are pluses and minuses to the butter file system. I have a couple of Arch systems that use that file system by default.
Yeah.
That I couldn't change it to say ext4, okay, if I desire to. But I have it. It does make some automatic stuff, but it's also creating, again, bloat like Peter found out. My root system's getting smaller and smaller and smaller on free space, and I can't even get my updates to work because I got all these time shifts sitting out there taking up a massive amount of that root folder. Okay. Same thing exists in Butter file system. Here's another thing, and this is a factor. I have seen a study where they did time studies. ext4 before some recent improvements in ext4's performance is 4 to 5 times faster than the better file system. So do you want to have more efficiency or not? And I'll be honest, I haven't used time shift in any of the better file system Linux distros, and I don't know where its default is. But if time shift exists, you would have to do what he did. You either make another empty partition large enough for several time shift images to reside in, otherwise it's in your root. Unless you make your system a single partition system. You can do that too. I call that the Easter egg. It's just like Windows and Mac OS. You have one supersized partition and that mixes everything together, and it's up to you to get rid of the old garbage, not the system itself. And if you get into certain things in a partitioned setup, like we've been doing in this group, we have the ability to rebuild the root without touching anything else. And that means I can have my system back up much quicker. The worst I have to do is some software that was on the system, I may have to reinstall. So I have to know an inventory of my stuff. Bob Premick has given a suggestion. If Synaptics doesn't exist, install it on your system. Synaptics gives you the ability to make an exportable file of all your installed software. And if you update that, say, once a month at least, or more frequently, depending on how you do your system, that gives you the probability of getting any missing software after a rebuild of the root system. But your home partition where all your data is at is segregated. If you've got additional partitions, they're segregated, even under Peter's current construct. all of his time shift backups will be under a protected partition outside the root, so he can rebuild the root at any time, reinstall any missing applications that didn't get installed. All of his home directory and data are there. All of his time shift backups are in the other partition. They're all there, et cetera, et cetera. What's not to like? So ext4 may be older, but it's not necessarily a dead horse. And they've made recent improvements in performance, and it's maybe now 5 to 6 times faster than the Butter file system. So wishing for something, you've got to know what you're wishing for.
Well, for sure. I think there's a YouTube channel. I think it's DJ Ware. Boy, the guy is really sharp. And I think it was his channel where he did compare all these file systems together. And that was interesting. I can't remember exactly the conclusions, but
Well, the thing is, you're looking for nirvana. That's
yeah,
what, when you're talking the Butter file system, you're hoping for a nirvana, that it will do snapshots automatically for you and bail your butt out with no penalties.
yeah, you have to pay for it. I agree.
Well, you have two penalties. Understand that.
Yeah.
Normal location for that type of snapshot is the root directory. When you haven't got enough free space to do any updates, what are you going to do? Take a can opener to your root folder?
Okay.
And like I said, performance. ext4 has been around a long time. It's even been improved recently, and it's way faster than the Butter file system.
Does Arch default to the better file system?
Not across the board. Some distros do it, some systems do not. And you can override at installation what file system is being used.
If you install an Arch system, does it put your home directory in a separate partition, or does it default to one partition?
Like I said, that's up to you.
Okay,
If
during
you're doing the install, you got to decide how you're going to set it up. We set up ours with separate partitions and the reasons why we went with the separate partitions. However, all of them give you the ability to set up the quick and easy. Take the whole drive. It makes one partition, that's it. And if something serious goes wrong, you may lose your data unless you had it independently backed up.
One of the reasons I brought this up is that I have been viewing some YouTube stuff concerning this proposed KDE Linux, and it's based on Arch apparently, for among other things, because it uses by default this better file system.
No, it's not because of that. You can get better file system on any of the
I know you could.
groups of Linux, period.
Well, let me just say it's by default. KDE.
Well, yeah, that's what they would normally default to.
Yeah.
It does not stop you from changing each directory, each partition's file format to something else.
But for whatever reason, they think Butter.
Well, I mean, if you do it the easy way, creating one big Easter egg, yeah, it's going to do it in the Butter file system because that's the automatic default. But when you do a partition type setup, you're in control. You decide what's going to be.
I could put my home directory in anything I wanted. ETX4 or BT, better.
I do the same kind of partition setup that I'm doing here in Mint on Arch distros. You got to understand too, Arch systems are bleeding edge technology.
Yeah.
Do you understand what that means?
That means you could shoot yourself in the foot
Or worse.
or the head. Maybe.
And that's not a joke. That's dead serious because bottom line is you could get in a new driver. It's not made for your hardware.
Yeah.
And you have older hardware. Now, if you had a real new version of a operating system, not operating system, of hardware, 13th, 14th gen Intel, ultra core processors that are the newer stuff. Now, Arch makes some sense because it'll do better support for that newer hardware than most other distros. However, eventually the other distros will catch up to supporting the same hardware. But there's a lot of people out there going out buying brand new systems, not knowing what the heck they're doing with the stuff. And the end result is stuff doesn't work that was working before on their older system. You're sitting there with older systems. So it doesn't matter what distro you got. It's either supported or it's not supported. But I do know, and I do have Arch systems. The only thing I don't have right now, I did have, is an RPM-based system. I am hoping when I get some time to look at Fedora 43. But otherwise, I'll probably get another setup of Gecko, which is a polished version of OpenSUSE. It's kind of like OpenSUSE is Canonical's Ubuntu, and Gecko is Mint to Canonical's Ubuntu.
Well,
so these are, you got to understand, there are a lot of different systems out there, different options, and it's mind-boggling the number of selections. There's a YouTube video out there. I had it, and his title is "Quit Asking for One Distribution of Linux." That's like saying eliminate the whole human race except for one person, you. That's the only way you're going to end up with one distro of Linux.
Well, life is interesting. I never.
Either that or you got to go with Windows or Mac OS. Both of them are proprietary, and there's only one version. And they have a limited amount of flexibility in customizing them and tailoring them to the way you want to have your system work.
Well, I never have the latest and greatest hardware. I'm always a generation or two back, like this HP Mini.
Both of your systems right now are antiques.
Yeah. Well,
It's not a joke. That's a fact because you're playing with on one system, maybe both, fifth, sixth, or seventh generation Intel processors. And you're talking right now, Intel 14 Core, Ultra Core 200 series, Ultra Core 300 series.
well, The
Now,
battery become rich on
even
it.
if you have a 7th gen compared to 14, that's
Yeah.
7 generations out. And then you add into the 2 core, ultra core generations.
And then there's GPU generations on top of all of that.
Well, GPU, that gets into a different category because one is the brain, that's the CPU of any computer, period. A GPU is something that's more geared to parallel processing, such as graphics rendering and coding and decoding of video, et cetera, et cetera. There are 2 different kinds of process. And so generally a GPU, like an NPU, which is a neural processing unit, are a peripheral working with the CPU and the code of the programs that are going through it. The CPU sends the needed instructions to the GPU or the NPU to do something that's very laborious and time consuming for the CPU to try and do versus what the the GPU and the NPU can do almost in the blink of an eye.
So the generations more or less have to match up. That's my point.
Not necessarily. I got some old GPUs that go way, way back to, at least 20 years now. I can put them in a current machine. They'll still work.
Can you
But
put,
they're not as good as what a modern one is.
yeah.
The difference is the one I've got might have cost me $10. The one that you want today, most modern, may cost you, if you're lucky, $1,500.
Yeah, they have 3
And,
fans on
and
it.
on top of that, it draws massive power. So your current power supplies would not work with it.
No.
And right now, in the economy, because of AI data centers, they are sucking up RAM memory like crazy. So the prices are going through the roof. Same for SSDs, same for spinning hard drives, large capacities in both cases, and GPUs. And if you can get a $1,500 drop-in card that wouldn't even work in any of your systems, you have to get for the Dell a low profile, and you don't probably have any kind of a GPU that would fit in the HP that you've got. Bottom line is it would cost you a fortune, and it's going up exponentially in price.
And that's why I'm not going to do it.
And next year's prices are going to be worse than what they are right now. Right now, there are very few realistic bargains for Black Friday and Cyber Monday,
Really.
period. The prices are going up, up, up. And every day you delay making a purchase, you're going to spend more money.
Yeah. That,
I just got a hold of some DDR3 memory for an old system of mine. And bottom line is, I had to pay more than I would have, say, 6 months ago. This is the way the world is right now. And data centers, because of AI, is the hot topic. Great. Well, in the news, they've been saying the last couple of days, there are data centers out there that are absolutely empty. Not one piece of equipment in them. Why? Because the electrical infrastructure cannot support them. It could be as late as sometime in 2028 before the grid can support them. If you haven't looked at your electric bills, they're going up, up, up because of the AI data centers. If you live fairly close to a AI data center, you may also see water bills going up, up, up for much the same reason, because those data centers need cooling, lots and lots of cooling. Now, a lot of them create retention ponds to recycle water, but you can only recycle so much because most of it starts evaporating from the heat of the hot water into the air. That's gone. You can't recycle it through when it cools down into cooling down your data center. You've got to replace it. So periodically, they've got to get more water in based upon the evaporation of the water that they were using. Otherwise, they'll run out of water and they'd have to shut down so the equipment doesn't burn up.
Well, we can move on to another subject. We've certainly talked about that a lot.
Yeah, we put Dennis to sleep.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody got anything else? Otherwise, I'll move on. Uh, let's see what I can destroy. No, I don't want that right now. I want this. And I want to go to my documents and I want to go to I don't want that one. I want this one. And now, sorry, I just thought of something and I want to make sure what I've got here. No, I ain't going to take any chances. I'm going to do that, get rid of that, and all right. Now let's see if I can bring that up and you know something? I got a bad feeling here. Yeah, Zoom died on my system that doing the display. All right, I got to get back into that. So you're going to have a little delay. So if you guys want to talk about something, go ahead. And drop dead. This thing may fail again too. And I knew something happened, but I didn't know exactly what. All right. Okay. Here it is. No. You gotta be kidding. Okay. All right, I'm in the software manager and I'm going to go into another 10 items that you at least need to know about. So the first one I've got here, gosh darn it, this is going to be a pain where I sit, is HARDINFO. And generally speaking, this has a lot of similarity to Microsoft Windows MS Info 32 information about your system. And I don't know, good. I'm surprised I was able to enlarge it. But anyway, it gives you kind of a recap. It gives you all kinds of categories of parts of your system, both operating system, kernel mode, boots, languages, file systems, displays, environment, users, and your hardware, processor, memory, PCI, USB devices. And I'm certain some of these are also available in KDE Discovery. So that's item number one. And let's see what we can get here for the next one. Ooh, boy, this one. I'm not exactly sure how to enunciate it, but it's a pipe wire control. And it's called PWVU control. And it has very little to say about it. It's a native volume control application made with GTK plus Rust. And it gives you playback, recording, input, output devices, and cards, if there are any in your system. So this is something that people may want to explore because Pipewire is one of the predominant audio systems. So we'll go to the next one. I'm not going to try and enunciate this one. Okay. It's called UPSCAYL, however you enunciate it. Is a free and open source AI image upscale. And one of the problems some people who like doing modifications to the pictures they take or images they scrape off of the internet is as they try and enlarge the size of the image, it may pixelate. And that's a headache. Theoretically, this will overcome that pixelation by using AI to figure out how to eliminate the pixelation and make it look like a whole proper image the size you want. That's my understanding of it. Next. This is called GPU Screen Recorder. This is a screen recorder that has minimal impact on system performance by recording a monitor using the GPU only. This presumes you have a iGPU, which is integrated into the system in place of older Intel type graphic chips, and or you have a discrete GPU, which is a separate unit um, plugged into your computer in some fashion. Uh, Similar shadow play on Windows. This is the fastest screen recording tool for Unix. The screen recording works on X11 and it claims Wayland on AMD, Intel, and NVIDIA. And since NVIDIA came up, by the way, if you're not aware of it, suddenly NVIDIA is starting to take notice of Linux and will probably be in the future here providing more support than they have in the past, Nat, for their proprietary software in the form of drivers to make their unit work on a Linux system better than some of the generic software that is currently being used. There's two different ones, something like Nuvo and Voltaren or something like that. At any rate, that part is good news for anybody that's using. And if you got a laptop and some the small desktops may include, instead of a Radeon graphics processor, a NVIDIA. So you can have some systems that were like older PCs that are now obsolete for Windows that have a NVIDIA graphics capability built into a laptop. To make that work good, you need good support from NVIDIA, which may be finally coming to Linux people. So cross your fingers, that works out. And Flame Shot, another one. There are two. There's an original native installation, and there's also a flat hub. I'm not certain which is the better. Right now, the native one has a 4.6 rating, and the flat hub has a 4.4 rating. Flame Shot is a powerful yet simple to use screenshot software. Notable features include customizable appearance, in-app snapshot editing, dbus interface, experimental GNOME KDE Wayland support, integration with IMGUR interface. Imgur, I'm not sure how that's enunciated. So this is basically a screenshot of something that somebody took, and this gives you various tools you can use to perhaps either change the orientation, add in text, arrows and pointers to highlight something to whoever is viewing this image. Next up, let's see if I can. Now I'm going to take a shot at this. Alpaca. Open this up, and it says a private AI client. And I think you're going to find in the future that a lot more people are going to be doing local LLMs on their system where they have the total control of it. The information in it is their own personal information and stuff they collect off the internet to feed the LLM. And this way, an operating system such as Windows has no information for. So it's a private type of LLM like Olama that's under Windows. And I assume this is made in the same vein as Olama, but it gives you a 3/4 of a gigabyte download, takes up 2.3 gigabytes of disk space at minimum, probably. It is under FlatHub. This is one of the things that Snap and FlatHub both provide you is the ability to keep running software that you have not updated in a long time, and it does not affect the performance of the operating system, and the operating system will keep allowing that program to run when normally it would not be if it was natively installed. Let's see. Now this one is a little easier. Shutter. And there's only one of them, but they show flame shot flat pack. And the reason they do that is Shutter is a screenshot program, but it may not be quite as feature rich as flame shot is. So they're saying if you're interested in Shutter, maybe you're interested in flame shot. The bad part, they don't show you the native flame shot package like they are doing here with Shutter. They only show you the flat pack version. So this gives you various tools similar to Snip and Sketch in Windows. Next on the list, only got 3 left. ClamAV. It's a flat pack only. And ClamAV is your modern and powerful task manager that helps you organize with a clean, intuitive interface, cloud synchronization, and advanced features. You'll never forget what matters again. So this is the first screen, and it gives you planning capabilities. It come on, you gave me another shot. They gave me another shot there, and I wanted to talk a little bit on that. But anyway, lots of people like to plan out their days in advance so they know when they can make new appointments without causing a problem. And this is such a package that already exists. You can go out and get it, look at it to your heart's content. Next one. I don't know how many of you will want this one, but it's in my list. Super Productivity, another flat pack only. Super Productivity is a to-do list and time tracking app that helps developers and professionals stay organized and focused. It comes time boxed Pomodoro, and flow time techniques with seamless integrations and other popular tools. So it depends on how you do things right now. I wouldn't expect many of you to be interested in this particular one, but I leave that up to you, the individual, to determine whether it's something you want to look at. And the last one, called Piper. Unfortunately, there's some other competing packages, but this is the primary one here. It's a native install, and it's a graphical user interface to configure game devices. Configuration options include changing the resolution DPI of the mouse, adding and removing profiles, setting LED colors, and changing button behaviors. So if you're looking under Linux for some way of dealing with modern mice that have side buttons besides the top three buttons, this might be exactly what you're looking for. Some of them also have color options. This is the wheel, and this gives you the middle click here. On some mice, you click down the wheel to give you the middle key functionality. And then you have the left and right mouse, the middle, and backwards if your mouse supports it. And they show here like a gaming mouse. Has lots of extra buttons to it to help the game player control the mice and play the game faster. That's my last one for this month. Hang on a minute while I shoot this system. Okay, now let's see if I can bring up. By the way, does anybody have any comments regarding the tools I showed you that are in the software manager?
Almost all of them are in Discover.
Yeah, I figured a high percentage would be.
Yeah, Hard Info has 5 stars, so I'll definitely take a look at that.
Well, hey, there's a lot of tools. Depends on what you do on your system as to how many of these tools that I showed in September and October also apply. Earl, you weren't at a few of the meetings but September I gave 10 tools roughly, and same for October. Most of them are in the uh, software manager of your distro, and only a small percentage you have to install them from the command line or Synaptics software package. Let's see what we can muster up here. All right. The first thing I've got in the way of a video presentation, we're not going to get many done here, is an odd named one. Come on. What the heck's going on? Everything's showing up but what I want. That's weird. I've never had that before. Let's try another one. Carburetor isn't what you think it is. It's a tuning tool for what the heck's going on? YouTube's doing something to me. What the heck is happening here? Well, this is going to shoot me in the foot. So far, this is the first time I can remember YouTube not working.
It looks like you're not signed in to Google or YouTube.
I never sign in to YouTube. Period. No ifs, no ands, no buts. And I review thousands of these damn things on a daily basis, never signed in.
Okay.
Maybe you could put one of those links into chat and let me see if I can access it.
All right. Hang on a minute here. It's an idea. What the heck? Oops. Dang it. I, mm. Let's see here. No participants on chat. And it ain't going to give me chat. All right. I got to end the sharing apparently. Just to get, I can't chat while I have sharing the screen. Dennis, there you go. See if you can bring it up. Otherwise, we'll have discussions and I'll send out the handout. Can you bring it up, Dennis?
Carburetor.
Mostly. My last job. Hey, what's up, guys? It's Josh here from Keep It Techie. Where
We can't see anything because you're not sharing.
Oh, all right. Let me figure this out.
It popped up on my machine when I put it in the browser.
Are you seeing anything?
Not yet. You got to select, you got to click on share, select the proper image, which is the Carburetor YouTube image, and then hit share.
Okay. How do I get to that image?
It shows you all the images possible for open programs when you click on the share button, the green share button. Okay, you got the desktop and everything. So minimize your desktop. Right in the center. It's in the center of the screen.
Go back.
There. Okay.
Click on that.
Yeah. No, you're already sharing. Don't worry about that.
You see it here?
Yeah.
Oh, can you
But
see it?
not optimized for sound. Okay. Stop. Now go back to that prior screen that you minimized of the desktop. Well, wait a minute. No, up at the top. Up at the top bar. Yeah, up there. You
This says your screen sharing, and it's a downward arrow, and this says stop sharing.
right. Above it should be controls. One of them listed as more, and you have to click that and select optimize.
The, yeah, there's nothing above stop share or your screen sharing, nothing
All
above
right,
it.
you're going to have to stop share.
Okay.
Hit the 3 buttons.
Now, uh, go back
Go
to
down
the green share button.
on the bottom. Okay, hit it.
All right. Now select the screen where the YouTube only is located at, which is your browser.
Okay, I guess that's there's only one thing showing.
Then select the share button.
Well, wait, across the top there's Chrome tab, window, entire screen. Do I want Chrome tab?
That doesn't ring any bells with me.
Are you
Oh
in a
yeah, here
browser,
it is.
Dennis?
Chrome tab, Carburetor.
Yeah.
Share.
You click on it and then you click share, but you should get a set of controls at the top. And one of them says more, and you got to go down to optimize. I can hear some audio, but it's so low, I can't make it out.
You can't see anything on the screen?
We got the screen, we got some sound, but it's so faint we can't hear it.
Oh.
Click on the speaker there.
Trace back to
in
you.
your
It makes the
bar,
whole process
make it
easy.
large,
You don't have
all the
to
way
install or configure Tor manually, write SOC proxy settings, or edit configuration files. It's basically a one-click privacy switch. And if you're into journalism, cybersecurity, research, or just privacy, Carburetor.
Let me start over.
Service tool called Carburetor. And if you've ever wished you could browse the internet without being tracked or fingerprinted, this one's worth your attention. Carburetor basically gives you system-wide Tor routing. So not just your web browser, but your entire Linux system can use encrypted Tor connections without complicated setup. And today I wanted to cover what it is, how it works, and of course, I'll walk you through installing it and using it on Ubuntu 24.04. But before we jump in, do me a quick favor, go down and hit that like button if you're learning something new, and subscribe to the channel if you want more Linux tutorials and privacy tools like this one. It really helps the channel grow and keeps the content rolling. All right, let's get into it.
The scanner reveals the brutal truth about your body that your regular scale will never tell you. For weeks, my scale showed I wasn't losing weight despite
So I'm at tractor.frama.io, and of course I'll have a link down in the description of the video, but this is how you get to Carburetor. And they also have another application called Tractor, which is a command line tool that allows you to connect to the Tor network as well. But Carburetor is the one I want to focus on. So Carburetor is an open source privacy app built for Linux. It's designed to route all your system traffic through the network, giving you anonymity across all your apps, not just your web browser. Now, most people are familiar with the Tor browser, which protects your web activity, but it doesn't cover things like email clients, command line tools, or system updates. Well, Carburetor actually solves that by running a local proxy in the background. It's also lightweight, graphical, and can be turned on and off with a single click. It's also super cool because it's built with GNOME in mind, so it integrates really nicely in Ubuntu and other GTK based desktop environments. Now, let's talk about why you might want to use this. In 2025, online tracking is everywhere. Websites, ISPs, apps, and even government level surveillance systems are all collecting data. And while VPNs are great for encrypting traffic and hiding your IPs, they usually require you to trust the VPN provider. On the other hand, is decentralized. Your traffic hops through multiple random servers called relays before reaching the destination. That makes it extremely difficult to trace back to you and makes the whole process easy. You don't have to install or configure Tor manually, write SOC proxy settings, or edit configuration files. It's basically a one-click privacy switch. And if you're into journalism, cybersecurity, research, or just privacy, Carburetor is a fantastic tool to have on your Linux system. Now let's hop over to my virtual machine so I can walk you guys through how to get this thing set up. What's up, y'all? If you've been watching my channel for a minute, you already know I stay talking about Linux. And if you're looking for a solid, reliable enterprise Linux distro, let me put you on to Rocky Linux. This is the go-to replacement for CentOS, and it's built for the community, by the community. It's got everything you need for a stable and secure Linux experience, whether you're running servers, home labs, or enterprise workloads. And the best part, it's backed by CIQ, making sure it stays rock solid for the long haul. So if you're tired of these companies pulling the plug on your favorite distros, Rocky Linux is where you need to be. And I've covered Rocky Linux before, and trust me, it's worth checking out. So head over to rockylinux.org to learn more and get started. Keep it techie. Peace. All right, so I'm connected to my Ubuntu virtual machine. This is 24.04, and let me go down and open up a terminal right fast, because one of the first things you want to do whenever you're installing any new piece of software is update your system. So let's go down and run our updates, and this is Ubuntu 24.04. I know it says Ubuntu or 22, but that's only because I did an upgrade on this one from 22.04 to 24.04, so just ignore the name. But this is a 24.04. So, and then apps, updates. You want to run your updates to refresh the repositories and all that good stuff on the system. And I believe this system is up to date. I believe it may have some old packages on here or something that needs to be removed, but it should be up to date. All right, cool. So we are updated. It says 9 packages can be upgraded, but let's see if we run the upgrade command, if it does anything. Now it says the following packages were automatically installed and are no longer required. And you can run these sudo auto remove. That'll remove those packages right there. So we good to go. Now let's go down and clear right fast, because one of the first things we need to do is install Flatpak. So let's run sudo apps install, and this is only if you don't have it on there. I'm gonna just run it just to make sure it's on there, but Flatpak and then -y, and this will install it. And as you can see, it's not on there. It's gonna go through and install it on our system. Okay, so Flatpak is installed. Now, one other thing I wanted to show you guys, let's go back to the website for Carburetor. So if we go down to the bottom, this will take you to the GitHub page. If you see down here at the bottom, it says Git repository for Carburetor. Click here, so click there. That'll take you to their Git repository. If you scroll down here, this will walk you through how to install it. It'll also show you the package status depending on what system you're using. If you're using Orch, you can install it using the AUR. But what you want to do is enable the repository first. So that's the command you want to run. I'm gonna just copy and paste it over to my system, and you have to use sudo. Switch back over and type sudo. And I forgot to.
Yes.
Stop it. Okay.
Okay.
Stop sharing too.
Sure.
We're running out of time, and while you were doing the playing there, you guys can watch the individual one. I already gave you the handout, so you can download the handout if you haven't already done so. But I did a little experiment.
Tim, you have not given us the handout.
Yeah, I don't see the handout.
It was sent out.
It's not here.
Good. Zoom is really the killer. I'm not kidding when I say that, because I was on X11 because of past problems. Well, guess what? The video works on Wayland now. I gotta, whoops, wrong thing. I gotta go back here. I'm telling you, I'd like to, and I've had at least 3 crashes now on Zoom on this Linux machine, but they were under X11. Chat. Come on, you son of a gun. Jeez, Pete. It could be because it killed my connection that you don't see it. What the heck?
Now it came up.
No, the location comes up, but there's nothing there.
This stupid thing is doing what it wants, and it's completely different than when it was under X11. I'm telling you, I'd like to shoot these people. Hey, very good. It don't work at all. It doesn't work no matter how you want to do it. Son of a gun. Here's an alternate way. Maybe I can get this to work. And okay. Now if I can shoot Zoom, there you go. Whoop. Guess what? Just lost Zoom again. So I assume you didn't get it.
Not yet.
Not yet.
You can protest Zoom because they're the ones that are screwing this up big time. And Tony, what the hell? I'm really tempted to take these people to the woodshed. I kid you not. Yeah, drop dead. Man,
If you want, you could just email the file.
what? Why
To
do
me.
that? We'll just forget the whole thing. At least that way, I'm not the only one having problems. Oh, man. What in the heck is this now? Oh, man. I want to shoot these people. Nope. And it just killed it again. Tough luck. What I would have shown you is that I don't know if I'd have to try and get into this again. And I don't know if it's worth it. Oh, Let's see. What the heck? Now, I didn't do the audio. I'd have to do that again for the umpteenth time. So now,
Linux and get into the tech field one command at a time.
as you can
And
see,
today we're checking out
Wayland login, not X11 like I was. This is the next one I had here. Stop doing this. New to Linux, break these 5 Windows habits first.
You're looking at this rather sexy desktop and your first thought is, okay, and now what? So you try to do something basic, such
Tim,
as
you're not
install a
sharing.
program. You download the Microsoft Edge installer, and it's simple.
Hang loose. It says it's sharing. If you don't see it, again, complain to Zoom. I can't control it. They're controlling it. These people are absolutely incredible. They break everything. And I mean everything. So I don't, we can have general discussion, but most of the presentation is just out of it. Did you ever get the download?
No, not yet.
No, you're not going to get it. Every time I try and send it, it crashes. Complain to Zoom. If we don't complain to them, they ain't going to do nothing. I don't know what else to tell you on it. What a pain in the butt. I don't even know. Boy, I don't know what else I can do. This even screwed up the Zoom video that was at the beginning of the meeting. At the moment, I've only got my local video recordings, and that's it. I'll have to mail you guys. That's the only way you're going to get the list.
Thank you, Tim.
I don't know any way around it. So,
Well, you know who was here.
no. Who was here?
The usual suspects.
Hawaii at 85 degrees.
That don't do me any good. We got a cold front going through that's going to crash temperatures way low, very high winds, possibly between 40 and 50 miles an hour. Going to make it colder than all heck. And it looks like the next 10 days are going to all be below normal. Last I saw. All right. We might as well call it quits, and then I can see what I can do. This is a Zoom issue. The YouTube will work under Wayland now, where it only worked under X11 since August, we found out. And now it works under Wayland, and you got no stability in Zoom to get things done. It crashed under 11. It crashed under Wayland. Can't do anything else. The only well, there is one other thing I can do. I can try. Got to stop and think a minute. How to do this. There's a slim chance I can get this to work. I'm gonna log off this one that ain't working right anyhow. And now I'm on one of my Windows machines. And fine. See if you got that.
Success.
Yeah, but that's I had to go to a Windows machine to get anything to work right.
Sorry about that.
I don't know what to tell you. If there's a way of screwing it up, they seem to do an excellent job. They're getting in the ranks of Microsoft. Don't know what else to tell you. At least we got that out to you guys. I'll have to email Earl.
Thank you.
Anybody got anything else? Otherwise, we might as well call it quits.
Everybody have a good week and a good Thanksgiving.
Why?
You too.
I'm not having
Because-
turkey. I'm not having turkey. I'm having cats. I got plenty of them. And they don't
You
get,
want to put a cat on a
and they don't get bird flu.
Go ahead.
They don't get bird flu. So you don't end up having shortages.
Okay. Well, anyway, thanks for hosting.
All right. Talk to you later then.
Have a good
Take
one.
care. Take care.
care.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.